Washington mornings on the Mall. 105.9 FM. And AM 630. WMAL.
7:07 on WMAL, where Washington comes to talk. Brian Wilson, Larry O'Connor from Breitbart TV is with us. We are joined on the phone line now by KT McFarland. KT, so many things that I want to talk to you about. It seems that we pushed a lot of decisions off until after the election. One of the things that we pushed off, we heard from a guy named Brian from McLean this morning who works for Lockheed Martin. He got his pink slip yesterday. He got his pink slip because they're worried about what's going to happen with sequestration. And they're being advised that, you know, there is the possibility you could lose your job. Funny how that came out right after the election and not before.
Key swing state.
Yeah, so sequestration. I mean, do you see a solution coming that will prevent these massive cuts in defense?
I think he's got to make a more fundamental question and find the fundamental answer. You know, President Obama has governed in a very partisan way, not reaching across the aisle. Now, what they've done is they blame the Republicans for not reaching across the aisle, but the bottom line is nobody's reaching across anybody's aisle. And will the president continue to govern that way? He doesn't need to anymore because he's already won, as he says, his last election. So he doesn't need those special interest groups to back him up for a subsequent election. So the question will be, will he oddly enough move more towards the center now that he has been reelected? And I think that'll be the big question. If he is going to do that, then maybe there's a deal to be had. But if not, then I think, you know, Katie barred the door. Defense cuts will be pretty significant. We're going to get out of Afghanistan come hell or high water. I think it's going to be and unfortunately, both of these wars are going to go down as losers. But the greatest tragedy of all, I think, will be cuts, if they happen, for veterans and wounded warriors. And I just hope that whatever we do with the defense budget and with taxes and everything else, that what we don't do is what we did in the 1970s, which is after an unpopular war, we took it out on the veterans, and we cut their benefits, and we cut their pay, and we cut their medical benefits, and we didn't give them the adequate mental and physical care that they needed. And I worry that after this war, another two unpopular wars, that we're going to do the same. They're an awfully easy group for budget axes to fall on.
KT, one of the more high-profile promises that the president made during this election season was to Vladimir Putin. It was transmitted to Vladimir that the president would have more flexibility come this second term. How do you see his flexibility on the international stage playing out? Well,
that's a really good question, and I think you will see some deals. You'll see some kind of a deal over a missile shield with Russia. It'll get rammed through Congress, and whether that'll be good for the country in the long term is another question. I think you will see a resurgent Russia around the world. You're already starting to see it with Russian military maneuvers and, you know, Russian submarines off the east coast of the United States. But the bigger deal, though, I think, in international affairs is that I think he'll get some kind of an agreement of some sort with Iran, and effectively the terms of it will be roughly as follows: that Iran will get right up to the point but not develop nuclear weapons. It's called being one screw turn away. And in exchange for that, we will recognize Iran, will drop the sanctions. Now, the question will be, it'll be hailed as a great victory by the president, I'm sure, but what will happen as a result of that, you don't know. Will the Middle East countries, the Arab countries in the Middle East, the Muslim countries, look to Iran and say, okay, you won, you're the top dog in the Persian Gulf, and we're all going to accommodate? Or will they say, ooh, you're a nuclear power, we're going to get nuclear weapons of our own, and then you have a nuclear arms race? It could go either way, but it's the perception, not just of Iran, but of the other countries in the Middle East, that the United States is leaving the region, and Iran is emerging as the most powerful.
But you didn't mention the state of Israel at once in that whole answer about Iran. I mean, they have something to say about this, don't they?
The administration doesn't figure on the state of Israel in the question of Iran, and I think that's their biggest mistake. You know, the most important relationship the president has right now with a foreign leader is really with Israel, because it's not so much what we think of Iran and nuclear weapons, what we think of the situation in the Middle East, what we think of Israel and Palestine and all the other issues and flurrying around in that part of the world. It's what the Israelis think about it. And if the Israelis conclude that the United States is not going to back them up, is not going to stop Iran, is going to throw them under the bus, whether that's a true perception or not, then the Israelis have every incentive of having a military strike, a unilateral military strike on their own. And while they can start that war, they can't finish that war. We get pulled into it.
All right, so what about Benghazi? That's another thing where it seems like all of the answers that we wanted about Benghazi were pushed off until this internal investigation was complete. What do you think we're going to actually find out when we get the results of that internal investigation?
Nothing. I don't think. There'll be a few low-level people that are blamed for it, and then the administration will figure that's that. They got away with it. But I do think that the House of Representatives, which is, again, in Republican hands, may choose to make that they may take a stand on that. And what they could do is subpoena members of the administration, professional and career diplomats, military intelligence officers, and have Watergate-like hearings. And then you will get to the bottom. What I can see now, from sort of the big picture of it, is the political leadership at all these agencies and at the White House has said, we didn't do anything wrong, it wasn't our fault, etc. And that the low level of these places, the career people, are coming out of the woodwork, and they're leaking to say, look, we wanted to give them more security at Benghazi before, we wanted to rescue them during, and we wanted to provide security after. And we were denied the ability to do that. So, we'll see. Will the House decide that this is an issue they want to pursue? Will they subpoena under oath in public hearings officials at various levels of government? And then if that happens, it could be another Watergate.
This could be a thing that drags on through the entire second term of this president.
Yeah, and the thing is, to me, it's even bigger than just what happened at Benghazi. It's the whole question of the administration's policy. When President Obama came into office 4 years ago, he said, whatever Bush did, I'm going to do the opposite.
Yeah.
And so if Bush was going to lead from the front, I'm going to lead from behind. If Bush was going to invade countries with a military, I'm going to topple dictators using the Air Force. If Bush was going to have an Iraqi provisional government and stick around after he toppled the dictator, I'm not going to do that in Libya. And so as a result, I think 180 degrees away from one point, nuts is still nuts if it's 180 degrees one direction or the other. And I think that the problem is not so much how you topple dictators and that you're going to do it differently than Bush. It's why are you toppling dictators in the first place? What are you doing in the middle of somebody else's civil war?
Right.
And so there we are in country after country in the Middle East toppling dictators, and what's coming in their place? It's not pro-American governments. It's anti-American Islamist groups in the Muslim Brotherhood.
KT McFarland, always a pleasure. Thank you for joining us.